Hello everybody, this is Ethan with WiseCrack Studios, and today I actually really wanted to go over the entire production process for the song that I released last week. Now this song is actually a bit of a milestone on this channel because it's the first song that I've put up where I was the recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, and was the only person to actually play any instruments for the entire song. So I thought that we'd go over real quick just a couple of the little production things that went into this song. Now the first thing that I wanted to go over real quick was the bass part here. Now something that happens occasionally whenever you're doing recording is you'll have a part that you really want to do, but for whatever reason, it just won't work. Maybe the instrument won't play it correctly. Maybe the person who is the instrumentalist just suddenly can't do it for whatever reason. Maybe they have the yips. A small little combination of that was what was happening here. So I ended up taking the original bass part and I moved it down to this synthesizer down here. Now, if you listen real quick, now, that part originally was going to be on a bass guitar, but for whatever reason, whenever I would try to actually play the part, when I wasn't recording, it would work fine. But then the second that the recording started, I just couldn't play it for whatever reason. I ended up going with a little adjustment, and I put it on a synthesizer, and I gave the actual bass guitar a much simpler part to work with. At least until the pre-chorus here, where I've got the bass guitar doing a much more rhythmically complex part. If you take a listen real quick to the intro versus the pre-chorus. That's about all that there is for the intro, as opposed to the pre-chorus. Now, the reason that part works so well, and it just builds up through the song, is because of the drum tracks down here. Now, I used Easy Drummer to be the actual drum set for all of this, but when I wrote in all of the MIDI, I was very specific to keep it to the beat perfectly. Originally, this song was a very electronic song. It's almost a hybrid of electronica and disco, a little bit. If you listen to the original, you'll kind of understand what I mean. In my case, I sort of rockified it, which is why I used what's supposed to sound like an analog drum set. But to sort of keep the original feel, I ended up using quantization to go through, and let me actually show you this real quick. I used quantization to actually go through and make every note be exactly on beat. And so because of that, it just starts to sound a little something like this. And for the pre-choruses, I actually added in a little bit of extra movement just by having the ride cymbal. Instead of getting hit on downbeats, it gets hit on the upbeats, like this. Which together with the bass part is going to sound a little bit more like this. Neat little tricks like this can help to build up everything, and especially for something like a pre-chorus where it's designed directly to build into a chorus, they're good for being able to build up the momentum so that when you finally hit that chorus, it's going to hit a little bit harder. Now, another neat little trick that I did was actually these synth strings down here. Now, if you listen to them, they just sound a little something like this. Just simple triads, not a lot to them. But I started originally with these ones. And I ended up adding in an octave above as well, which is just this. And together they make a nice little effect where you still have a little bit of the warmth of that string part, but you also get the effect of having them both going at once, and you can't quite pinpoint down what is a part and what is not. And it just adds a little bit more of an electronic feel overall, which is exactly what I wanted for this. Guitars, for the most part, are fairly simple. I've got the cleans that are going here that I brought in for the pre-chorus just because they're doing simple strums at a time. And overall, they just add a little bit of movement to everything once you hit the pre-chorus that just continues to build as you keep going through the song. Once you hit the refrain, which is effectively a second intro and the second verse, I've got this little palm muted guitar going as well. And that's basically the entire part. But it helps to drive forward some of that energy just a little bit, so that when we build into the next pre-chorus with all these little overdriven guitars right here, it just helps to build up to that point rather than you just hit it and it's just suddenly there out of nowhere. Now you've got a little bit of movement underneath everything. I'll go ahead and play this part for you real quick and I'll sort of toggle them on and off. I'll just keep biting my tongue till all you want is done, alright. And you just wanna leave me, oh yeah. It's not the most obvious part in the world, but you can feel it whenever it goes away. The acoustic guitar is really simple. I went ahead and I just double mic'd up my acoustic guitar to play this. I did do a neat little thing for the intro and the refrain that sort of builds on what the bass guitar was doing though. So let me play that for you real quick. That little ba-dum-dum is just me taking my hands off of the guitar, playing a chord, and then putting my fingers back into the same chord formation that I was doing before, which normally isn't something that most people would do, but I thought with the bass guitar already doing a nice little trick like that, like just going down by a step and then going back up, I thought it would be a nice little trick, and together it does kind of work. You can see why you wouldn't necessarily do this because they're playing different chords at the same time, but it is a neat little trick nonetheless. And then it goes into the normal part, of course. The lead vocal is actually one bit where I actually played around a lot with it. Now, in the original recording, the original vocalist goes through and does a falsetto part for all of the choruses. Now, if you don't know what falsetto is, that's sort of when, especially for male vocalists, you do a little jump in your register. Best way to put it is you're going from chest voice to head voice, and you can sort of hear and feel a lot of power go away whenever you do that. But you get a much higher range as the result of it. So sometimes people will use it. It's a very seldom used trick because it's something that is much harder to control, and it sounds kind of weird when not used in the right context. And so I kind of emulated it for this first chorus, so if you just listen real quick. I'm not freaking out, but it feels like time is running out. You can hear sort of that freaking out, where it just sort of, you hear that jump and you know that there is a very immediate change, especially listening to it soloed. I'm not freaking out. It's a lot more obvious, and especially whenever we hit later in the song, you can tell what is my normal voice and what is a falsetto. Because I just don't like using falsetto a lot when I don't have to, it always sounds weird. I went through and for the last chorus, to sort of give that first one more of an effect to why I'm using the falsetto, I came through and I did the part again, but I just used chest voice for the whole thing. So if you listen to that real quick. I'm not freaking out, but it feels like time is running out. You can hear those synth strings really wanting to go right now. But when you listen to it, it sort of creates more of an effect. I'm not freaking out. This time, whenever it happens, there's a lot more power, a lot more drive pushing the entire thing, and especially with everything that's already driving and moving the energy forward, doing that falsetto again just would not have worked. Now, for the lead vocal here, I'm actually recording through my external preamp into my audio interface. I don't get to use my preamp a whole lot for things that aren't lead vocals, but I love getting to use it whenever I get the chance because the preamp that I use is also a channel strip, which means that it has EQ and compression controls on it directly, which means that for a recording like this that's going to be very dynamic, especially with falsetto in there, there's going to be a lot of volume changes. And so having a compressor that's just built in, that's just going the entire time, and that I just set the one time and then I can play to it from there, helps immensely for being able to do anything. And especially listening to this last chorus over here, you'll hear sort of me moving back and forth away from the microphone, which is just something that naturally happens. Whenever you think you're going to be louder, you pull back from the mic a little bit, and when you think that you're going to be quieter, you pull yourself into the mic a little bit, and it creates nice little effects in either direction. The only thing is you want to make sure that your singers, whenever they're performing to the mic, are not getting too far or too close. Typically, a nice little trick is to put the pop filter about 4 inches away or so, 4 to 8 inches. And so then when they're playing to the pop filter, they don't get too close, but also if they get farther away, it shouldn't make too much difference, except that the volume is going to cut down a little bit. Now, listening to this chorus again, you'll be able to hear me pull away from the mic on those loud parts in particular. I'm not freaking out! It's not incredibly obvious, and the fact that the compressor is hitting as hard as it is right there is helping quite a bit with that effect. But especially with all of this coming together, and the way that I had EQ'd everything from the beginning, it just makes my voice sound a little bit more robotic. That is almost exactly what I wanted. Since I had to go through and basically change genres on the song, it's a nice little effect and a nice little trick that I actually really enjoyed that it came out this way. If you haven't already, go listen to the original song. It's Freaking Out by Mystery Skulls, and if you really haven't, go listen to my cover of it. It should be the last video that came out before this one. A good amount of the tricks I use throughout this song are ones I've talked about on the channel before, so go ahead and look through previous videos. I know I've talked about at least a few of these tricks before, like using a DI and an amp, double tracking guitars, etc., etc. I'm more than likely going to go through and make a video on the actual mixing of this song, because there is quite a bit that went into it. But for now, this has been Ethan with WiseCrack Studios, and I hope that you have a lovely day.